Welcome here, everyone, to Horse Expo Canada 2024. We are so excited to be here with you guys again this year. Last year, when we reflected on doing the Horseman's Hot Seat, we just kind of had to pinch ourselves a little and just feel like we had the best seat in the house all weekend long, getting to learn from so many incredible trainers and clinicians and hearing a little more about how they got to where they are. So in case you didn't know, my name is Kylie Bartell.
I'm Alicia Bradburn.
And we are your co-hosts of the Horseman's Hot Seat this weekend at Horse Expo Canada. And today we are so excited to kick off the morning with a very special guest, someone we know pretty well and have really enjoyed connecting with in the past.
Yes.
Britton Mills-Dawes is here with us this morning. Thanks so much for being here, Britton.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome.
So awesome.
Such a treat getting to connect with you again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
seeing you guys always.
For sure.
Well, we don't want to waste any time. We'll get right into it.
Absolutely.
Because we're dying to pick Britton's brain about a few things.
Yes.
So, as some of you may know, or maybe not, Britton, how would you describe, I don't want to get wrong, what it is that you do in the horse industry?
Yeah.
So I do a lot of holistic care is kind of the gist of it if you want to kind of do a full circle moment. I do massage, vertebral realignment, and nutrition. That's kind of my bread and butter. But I kind of do everything that works in those spaces. So I like to do a lot of connection with what does your vet say? How do I implement to help with rehab and prehab?
Okay.
So that's the gist, I guess, of it. I'm an equine therapist is what I call myself.
Okay.
Sometimes people understand it better as a body worker.
Okay. Yeah, body worker, because I think sometimes if it's an equine therapist, we can get that mixed up with equine facilitated therapy, whether you're doing the human, but you're actually dealing with horse health and the integration
Horse health,
of
horse health, bodies, and nutrition.
I mean, I need the human therapy as well, so.
we all do.
We all do. Yes, absolutely. I feel you on that. So this is a bit, just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit around what are some of the typical problems people usually come and seek you out for?
You know what, when
question.
they have nowhere else to go, that's a lot of it, where they're like, my vet says they don't know what's going on, my trainer says it's just behavior and they're just a really stubborn horse. I see a lot of that, or for maintenance. So I work with a lot of eventing horses, actually, because they use a lot of different muscles all the time because they're doing the jumping, they're also doing dressage. It's just a little bit more accumulative of muscle tension. So I work with them quite often, more on a regular basis for prevention of injury.
Awesome.
So I guess I would be seeked out for either kind of last resort or want to avoid getting to a position where you're going to be in that situation.
You know, I love that so much. It reminds me, there's this quote about how an ounce of prevention is worth 10 doses of cure.
Totally.
Even from both an emotional standpoint and a financial standpoint. So that idea that you're
Definitely financial.
100% being on that preventative side of things. And I think a lot of times people, they really want to do well by their horses. They want to take care of their horses well, but they haven't had the time or the opportunity to go pursue all the education on the nutrition and the body work side of things.
And they don't have the tools to set them up properly sometimes, because the internet is great, but it also has a lot of misinformation. And there's a lot of people who mean well to give you information because it worked for their horse.
Right.
And then they assume it's a blanket statement that will work for everyone's horse. And so they write this whole piece, or they share it in some form saying, this is the way you got to do it. And it may not work like that, and there's not necessarily research behind it, or kind of multiple cases that show that actually works. It's just a one-off.
Right.
And so it's really great that we have the internet to give us a lot of information, but it also sometimes leads to misinformation, and that's something that I really try to be avoid and also be preventative in some cases, where I write articles so that people can look at them, and I source them because the information may change 10 years from now. So that way, as we know, everything on the internet lives forever. If somebody sees that article 10 years from now and goes, this is not how it's done, they can look at that sources and go, oh, those sources are all from 2000 20, maybe it was just different back then. And so it gives people not only information, but context to the information. I'm not just saying, hey, I am who I am, trust me. Right. I'm saying, I am who I am, I have knowledge, but here's what I use to back up said knowledge.
Yeah. Very much. It just makes me think of academic integrity, right? Yes. Like being able to cite your sources so that even if someone might not agree with or have, maybe they have a contrary experience to what they're reading, they can, again, hold it in its context and appreciate the value for what it's there.
Exactly. It's not just a trust me, I'm Britain.
Right. Yeah. Love that. That kind of like, I have nothing to hide and I can show you exactly where these thoughts come from.
Exactly.
Because I've done my research. Yeah. And now you don't have to when you work with me because I'm bringing that wealth of knowledge into the space.
Yeah. So, Britton, another area we're excited to get you to shed some light on from your perspective as a horse healthcare facilitator. If people are purchasing a horse, what kind of things would you encourage them to look for, and what would be some red flags?
I think this is a really good question because it can kind of go in multiple different directions. And my first thing that I want to say is, what are you wanting to invest in? So you may have a reining horse that you look at it, they're moving perfectly, their gait is great, they can do all the bells and whistles, and in health-wise, they look in great condition. But then you go to get them back up, for example, and they only turn to one side. They don't go on a straight back up. That tells me right away that there's likely tension in the psoas muscles, which are these really big muscles underneath that hindquarters in a bit of a tucked in area that you can't see right away. And it's not that that horse is not usable or you can't work with it now, but what it is to be mindful of it, because you will either preventatively, it would be best to start actually getting regular work on it to avoid it from getting too tight and then becoming an issue where they can't perform, which could be a year down the road, it could be 6 months down the road. You really don't know based on that muscle tension. And it's not saying that you can't buy that horse, it's how much are you willing to invest in that horse. I like that. Right? Yeah. So instead of phrasing it as red flags, I think it's what you're willing to work with.
I like that.
And shoulders, it can be really sore in one area, doesn't mean it's not able to perform. And so it's just really about figuring out and having the information to know what that means. Oh, okay, I'm seeing that it's not backing up straight. So, okay, this is something that I'm going to have to invest in later. And then moving forward either with the purchase or not, depending on, again, what you're wanting to invest in.
It's almost more like degrees of soundness. Exactly. Because there's no perfect horse, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And instead of seeing it as just plain lameness, it can be fixed, right? It just needs the work. And if you're not going to do the work, it'll get worse and worse and worse. And so we want to make sure that we're setting them up for success, because what we can often see is behavior issues start to come into play because they're telling you, this makes me sore, this bothers me. And sometimes people will see that as reluctance instead of seeing it as, oh, this is painful. And then they'll keep pushing them past that breaking point and almost flood it. And then it may work in that situation and they may work with that owner, but if they switch hands, all of a sudden if you give them the chance to say no because you're respecting that boundary and you know when pain is, and some people don't know, and that's okay. It's not saying they're a bad owner or they don't know how to work with horses. It just means they don't have that knowledge. But if they move to an owner who does and gives them the chance to say no, you'll often see very dangerous behaviors come into play. They get way more animated because they go, you'll recognize it, but it's only if I'm really dramatic about it. So then they will explode, if that makes sense. It'll become, instead of going, I'm going to be resistant to this because I'm sore, it's, I'm right in there, dangerous behavior, I'm rearing, I'm kicking, I'm bucking immediately because you let me tell you, and now I have to give a big reaction.
right? Otherwise, you might miss it or you might not notice, and then I'm in pain or I'm really struggling, and I need you to see it. Actually, that helps a lot with one horse I'm working with. I'm going to take away and think about that because it's interesting how sometimes when I work with it, you can see the resistances, you can see some of the imbalances, but she tries really hard, and sometimes other people come in and she just blows up because it's like. And we know we've had the vet check her out. She's got a lot of physical things we're managing.
And a lot of, I try to really stress a lot of really reactive horses. It's not out of malice. It's actually likely out of pain because horses in general, they are, one, prey animals, so they're not known to immediately do essentially predatory behavior.
Totally.
However, when they are sore or if something's wrong, they're pretty stoic about it because in the wild, if you're not, you kind of get taken out by the cougar.
You're the one that gets picked out. If the whole herd runs and you're the one limping, they're going to see you and come after you.
And then you also learn to be very reactionary when you are sore because you are a prey animal. So you got to defend yourself. And although they are domesticated for the most part, they still have that part of their brain that kind of tells us that you still might be a predator to me.
Sure. Yeah. That instinct is baked in there over how many thousands of years. That's not going away.
Yes, absolutely.
And I just want to highlight what you said because it's so good. It's gold that we're getting here. That like it's seeing those little things, like you said, that you might pick up. And then asking why.
Yes.
And then if it does, like, I guess, escalate to the point where a horse is doing something dramatic, like you said, because that really isn't
in
natural.
The nature right away. Yeah.
That then it's, again, that happens to all of us, you know, where it gets to that point. But at that point, again, going, okay, why?
Yeah, and I want to preface and say I am not perfect here. I am not suggesting that I am.
Nobody is.
I had a hard time getting my horse even here this weekend. It took me 5 hours to load him, and that was something that I had to self-govern a little bit. Because he's always trailered great, and then yesterday I was on a timeline. I probably was feeding some of the energy at that point, and he just went, nope. So taking a moment, I even called Lori Duff. She was very helpful, and just I needed somebody to ground me in that moment because I was so frustrated and disappointed, not just in my horse, but myself. I was like, what am I doing wrong? You know, and I think a lot of horse owners do that. What am I doing wrong? And sometimes you're not doing anything wrong. It's just they don't like that particular block over there, but you wouldn't know that. You just see them reacting and trying to take that moment to ground yourself and go, okay, I'm going to try and look through their eyes and see what might be an issue here. And something that Lori mentioned to me, she said, it might be everything's fine except that trailer because it's not the trailer we normally use. And she said, there could have been a calf that died in there. It could have been used at the vet. Who knows what happened? Even if it's washed, they can sometimes still smell that blood. And it wasn't something that immediately came into my head. And I went, okay, that makes sense. Okay, we're going to fill it with some hay. We're going to get some of this and try and minimize what could be a factor that's invisible, that you don't even see being there.
Absolutely. You know, even as you're describing that, like the ability to think like a scientist with curiosity as opposed to getting stuck in judgments and taking things personally. And it's interesting, even as you were describing that dynamic, it made me think of when I was doing my counseling training. We would often, when we're chatting with students, we're all having to counsel each other and learn this stuff, and it's hard, and we would trigger each other all the time, and we had this joke like, is this hashtag my stuff or hashtag your stuff? Because anytime you have a relationship with two beings in the dynamic, they're bringing something to the table.
Always.
I'm bringing something to the table. And sometimes it really is their stuff. Sometimes it's my stuff. And sometimes it's the dynamic between the two. So to stay just very curious, non-judgmental, and look at what's in front of you and go, how do we work with what's happening and try to change the variables?
Yeah, in this moment, how do I work with this? Because every moment is going to be different. So sometimes you need to be really soft. Sometimes you need to be really hard. And being able to kind of almost recognize that, even if you need outside help to do that, like with Lori, I needed that moment. I needed her to tell me what to do because I had hit the point of frustration that I was not useful in that moment. I was like, I'm feeding his energy.
Well, it just makes me think of the importance of having good community around
Absolutely.
you too. Having the people you can call, that you can draw on, that aren't going to judge you in that moment, but are going to get in your corner and be like, kind of like roll up their sleeves and be like, how are we going to figure this out together?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important statement to say, that are non-judgmental, because there is many times when you're in a community, and I think this is something as a community we really need to grow in, of everybody has knowledge. And some is right, some is wrong, but it doesn't mean they're a bad horse person.
Totally.
And so when you are seeing somebody do something with their horse, instead of immediately going to that judgment side where you're like, they don't know what they're doing, look at what they're doing. One, take a moment to think about it. They may be new to the sport, and you don't want to essentially shun people from coming into your community.
Yes.
And number two, maybe they're doing it different for a reason. Totally. You know, again, not every method works for every horse. My horse is, he needs a soft hand at all times. If you get really aggressive with him, he will get really aggressive back. He asserts himself in a way that can become dangerous. And so I have to preface that whenever somebody would like to work with him, because if you get really animated, he will come back at you, and he's a big boy. So, and he's only 4, so he does still need to learn some boundaries, of course. But I have to be a soft and a calming influence to him. I can't get that animated, and I can't get back. Like it can't come off as that energy, or he immediately will fight it. Totally. And so what I might be doing with him may look to you like I'm letting him push me around, but really in reality, it's the only way I'm going to get anywhere, because I learned that when I first got him. I've had him since he was really baby, and I learned that he did not handle it, and he would become really reactive.
Yes. Makes me think of, there's this one phrase I heard in a class one time, that all behavior makes sense, but you might not have all the puzzle pieces yet.
Yes.
So instead of, when you see someone doing something that doesn't make sense to you, and you go, that doesn't make sense, instead of like judging or jumping to the judgmental thought, to pause and be curious and be like, that doesn't make sense to me, so I must not have all the puzzle pieces to whatever's going on
and
there.
I think that's just everything horsemanship. We need to think of it that way. This behavior, he never does it. Okay, why?
Yeah.
Curiosity.
Oh, he always does this. Why?
Yeah.
You know, both sides of the coin. He never does it, he always does it. We need to ask that question, why? Is it being stubborn, or is it more?
Totally.
Is it pain, or is it just being a jerk?
Or lack of knowledge, lack of skill, lack of training, or whatever it might be. Yeah, absolutely. So good.
That also makes me think of something that I think it was Linda Pirelli who said, when you see like a behavior, kind of like what you're saying, it's like, why? Or she would say like, isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Instead of being like, this is very frustrating or scary, or it's like, because it creates curiosity, which gets us closer to the solution rather than just dwelling in that place.
And it very much changes your energy in that moment.
And horses respond to curiosity, right? Like if you think about
they're curious.
A horse that's fearful, let's say of a tarp, right? Where you're tarp training, trying to desensitize, they see it and they are immediately like, nope. They have the dragon breath, the full, exactly. What you want from them, at least from my standpoint, is for them to be curious about it. It's not about getting over that behavior in the immediate. It's about, okay, I'm interested in it. If they're just so monkey-brained at that point they can't even get over it, then I just honestly just want them to be able to sniff it and move. If they can do that, that's enough for me that day, because I want them to be curious about it, not fearful of it.
So good. I do have another question I really want to get to.
Burning question.
I've been thinking about this one a lot. So, you know, we know a little bit about your story, and so we know that you've actually overcome quite a bit to be a professional in the horse industry. And so, you know, one of the things we're curious about with everyone, but especially for you, is that, you know, what have you overcome to be in your position as you are now, and what makes you want to have horses as a profession, not just as a hobby?
You know, I won't get too much into my story because there's some less than nice details.
For sure.
But I was in a pretty bad accident with one of my horses. At the time I was 18, and it left me in a wheelchair for a bit. And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever get back on a horse because I was terrified. I got trampled, and it left me with permanent injuries that I still live with today. Right. And I was not just scared of the horses, but the community. I was worried that I was going to be judged because of what happened, or when I did try and go ride, because of the permanent injuries that I have, people would be constantly at me saying like, oh, you're not doing this properly, not realizing that I just could not physically do that. But I think what got me kind of working in the profession itself was I knew from my own standpoint how much pain affects your life. Yeah. It's hard to get through day to day when you have pain, and it's unfortunately something I do live with the rest of my life, and it's okay. It's something I've learned to handle, but it took a while. It wasn't instant, and I needed to really reach out to people to help me get to the point where I could function. And also to encourage me, because when it came to horses, everyone knew that was my love. Like, I loved horses. It was one of the only things that was really consistent throughout my life that I always was a part of. And then all of a sudden it was taken away. And everyone went, I just try, just try. And it wasn't even about riding. They're like, just try and get close. Because for that almost a year, I even struggled coming back to the area where the accident happened. I would go into panic attacks, and I would kind of have an episode, if you will, of fear. And so I think that has taught me how to appreciate what's going on in the horse's mind, because if they've been through a traumatic event, I understand that you don't always remember it until you're there. And then once you're there, it's really hard to put yourself in a position that you're feeling okay about it. And so that horse may be in the same situation, and it may not have been when you were around, and it could be a completely different situation. It's just the smell. It's somewhat similar. And then they have this blow up or reaction of some kind, and you don't understand why. And so my big driver in this industry is to, like we said a few times, to ask why. We won't always find the issue. We won't. They can't exactly tell me, oh, this happened to me right here. But we can have an understanding and an empathetic viewpoint of that, and be able to say, okay, this situation seems to cause these reactions every time. I'm going to be more empathetic and sympathetic to what you're going through here. And I may not see what the trigger point is, but I'm going to do my darn bestest to help you alleviate that stress, whether it be a pain, whether it be, like we said, traumatic event, because I have to do that for myself. Sometimes, even just getting back onto a horse, that's always, this has been almost 6 years since I've had this accident. And still, the moment I put my foot in that stirrup, my heart rate, I feel it just go. The horse is quiet, doesn't do anything, and I have to settle myself, because if I lead that impression, I might start an event where he's like, oh my gosh,
or something to be afraid
panicking. Of. So I have to take that moment, and if I have to go on a mounting block instead of hopping up, I'll do it. And so just giving your horse the tools to settle themselves. And so that's kind of what got me closer into my profession in that regard. And my mission, if you will, in the horse world is just to help where I can. And I can't fix everything, and I don't promise to, but I will do my best, and I will treat them like they are either my horse or myself. And I will put myself in their hooves, and I will say, okay, what is going on here? And it won't be one time, and that's what I like to say to clients. I want to build a relationship with your horse. Me seeing them once a year doesn't build that relationship. I need that because they'll tell you more than they'll tell me. I'm there for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. You're with them every day. Yep. And if you see something, I'm going to take you at your word for it.
Yes.
Because I'm not there 24/7. If you say he trips a lot, but I didn't see it in that little demo of 10 minutes, yep. I'm not going to say you're wrong. Yep. I'm going to go, okay, he's tripping. Which foot did you think it was? You don't have to know the answer, but if you can help guide me, we will get through the problem a lot either faster or connected. And that's why I say my slogan is, where you are always heard. HERD. You are part of my family. Your horse is part of my family. I will make sure I do everything for them.
I like it.
And you also can tell me things because I don't want you to feel like you're told I know everything. Yes. You don't matter. Yes. You matter. Yeah. Your voice matters. You're the reason I'm here. You are the biggest advocate for your horse.
Amen, sister.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I want to stand up and give a standing ovation to that.
Yeah.
I love the way you think in that regard. I think that's something that you really sets you apart and makes it why it's so easy to feel so drawn into even just side conversations where all of a sudden it's like, I just want you to, from here, the way you speak and the heart that you share. Yeah. It's like, I want you to be with my horses, and it's like that draw of
I'm
wanting
happy
to be
to
a part
do
of
it.
the,
I'll drive
it's
out.
I want to be a part of the herd. Like that feel is so strong.
And I try really hard to make sure people feel that way because I don't ever want somebody to not tell me information because they're worried that I'm going to judge them on it.
Totally.
Because you never know. A horse, I see this a lot. It's usually an injury that causes them to buck from a trot to canter. Mm-hmm. And people immediately worry that it's because they did something, so they don't tell you. Mm-hmm. Usually, there's two causes. When somebody tells me that, I immediately go to, and they are almost always right. But if I don't have that information, I'm having to scan the whole body. Yeah. I'm doing more it could take longer. Yeah. It can take longer is the best way to put it. Totally. And it's a judgment-free zone. 100% when you work with me, it's judgment-free. What you do is what you do. Yep. We will educate where we have to, and we'll work together.
Love nice. That. Yeah. Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but there's one question we really wanted to ask you too, so we'll make sure we sneak it in. Yeah.
When it comes to horse health and specifically feed, is there any myth that you think needs to be busted?
Yes. When it comes to feed, I really think it's really important to recognize that they need a balanced diet. A lot of people think, let's think about humans. We have food groups, and we have food groups for a reason, because if we don't get enough protein, we can't build muscle. If we don't have enough carbs, we can't get through the day. So one or the other is not wrong. You should always have all of these elements added, and it's the same kind of thing with your horse. If you're feeding lots of grain, lots of starch, you're risking health issues. And it's plain and simple like that. You'll see colic increase in your horse. The studies show that, I think, off the top of my head, I believe it's 6 times more likely to colic if you have 2 kilograms of grain a day. So making sure you're doing the portions correctly. Also knowing that protein builds muscle. If you do not have enough protein, it doesn't matter how much groundwork or muscle building exercises you do, it won't go anywhere. That top line will stay shallow.
You see that quite a bit.
Yes. And then also making sure you have enough forage. Forage is so important, and especially with the drought conditions going on, I know that it's a little bit harder. So when you are going to be spending that money on that forage, knowing when it is essentially prime, you want to make sure you're trying to get the best quality, and so looking for that. So you see either 2 sides of the coin: only forage, only grain. So I want people to really see it as they all have to be integrated. More forage, a little less grain, but they still both have to be there.
Balance.
So good.
Yeah.
Man, okay. Well, I know we have to wrap it up because we're at the end of our time, but I just want to maybe wrap up with asking, can you let people know where your booth is, where they can come find you to talk more with you if they'd like to, and just give us a little summary of the other things you're going to be doing throughout the weekend?
Yeah.
So I love talking to people, as probably everyone can tell right now. So you are more than welcome to come find me. I'm hopefully going to be in my booth, which is 1410, all the way at the other end.
Okay.
If I'm not there, I'm at the barn.
Okay.
And you are also welcome to come see me and pet my horsey. He loves attention, so everybody is welcome. And then if I'm not there, then I will be in the arena. I can't remember which name it is.
Is it the Western Outfitters Arena, the far one at the very end? Yeah, the
Western Outfitters. And it will be doing flexibility training. So we're going to be talking about conditioning. We're going to be talking about nutrition. And we're going to be talking about how to assess tension for yourself so that when you see it, either you can try and fix it yourself or you know when to call somebody.
Yeah.
And so it's going to kind of flow that way. We're going to talk about warm up, then get into attention, then stretches, then we're going to talk about some nutrition, when to call in a professional, and then talking about cool down and how it all wraps together and why flexibility improves performance.
That sounds very interesting.
I know. I wish I could clone myself and sit at all the arenas all day long and stay here and talk to everyone. It's like, sounds awesome.
I wish too.
I know, right? And also just so cool, that focus on flexibility. I was just listening on the mental health side of professionals, like from us, they often notice that like the hallmark of like healthy humans is mental and emotional flexibility. And then that like, so like that idea of like mentally and emotionally as a person, physically for athletes, flexibility is like so huge. And then of course that would make sense why that would translate to horses as well.
And just like a small tidbit, we're talking about something similar like that in the flexibility training about how it improves mental state.
Amazing. Well, it's all connected. Like it's just the mind.
The holistic perspective.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I think that being able to see things in its context I think being able to see things, whether it's horses or ourselves, in our context is what helps us really get to like those deep moments of understanding and breakthrough.
And connection.
And connection, and all the good things that make this worthwhile. So
exactly.
My goodness, I know we could keep chatting with you for forever, but thank you so much for kicking off Horse Expo, the Horseman's Hot Seat this weekend. It was so fun to be able to visit with you more. And so make sure you guys pop by, check out Britton's booth, see her demos. And thanks so much for being here with us today.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And there is a giveaway at my booth. So
love that.
There's $500 worth of prizes.
Oh my goodness. I love free giveaway things. That's
free
so
things
fun.
Is great.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Britton.
We'll see you guys very soon for our next interview.
Yes, with Wendy Johnson.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.